Welcome to Week 3, Chapter 7. This chapter goes through how cells release chemical energy through the use of a mitochondria. Cells do three basic metabolic processes to release energy: glycolysis, Krebs, and electron transfer, which is also known as oxidative phosphorylation. So let's get started. Here we see an electron micrographic image of a mitochondria, which is the organelle that we know of as the powerhouse of the cell because it produces ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell. We can see from this picture that the mitochondria is a double membrane system, and it's within these membranes and also within the fluid contained within the mitochondria that we have enzymes that are necessary for these processes of cellular respiration. So just to review, in the previous chapters we talked about how cells fix carbon from carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis. And there's two phases to that, the light-dependent and the light-independent reactions, with the main input reactant as carbon dioxide, water, and photons of light, which is your energy. And the main products are glucose and oxygen. So now, how do cells take the energy contained within the carbon to hydrogen bonds of glucose and use oxygen to produce energy? Well, if oxygen is present, that is going to be through the process of aerobic cellular respiration. And in essence, any cell that has the organelle mitochondria can perform aerobic cellular respiration. So eukaryotic cells can do this process. That includes cells of plants and cells of animal, as well as any other eukaryotic cell, like a cell of a fungus or a protist. So this image is a summary of the processes that make up aerobic cellular respiration. The first step is glycolysis. The second step is the Krebs cycle, and then the third step is electron transfer phosphorylation. Notice that the first step, glycolysis, occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell because that's where the enzymes that are needed for this process to occur are found. And the Krebs and electron transfer phosphorylation occur in the mitochondria. Also notice that because the Krebs and electron transfer occur in the mitochondria, and we can see down here that oxygen is needed, the Krebs and electron transfer are termed aerobic cellular respiration. Glycolysis is a part of aerobic cellular respiration because the products of glycolysis, pyruvate and NADH, are used by the mitochondria, but it in and of itself is considered to be an anaerobic process. So notice in the first stage, glycolysis, we're going to take glucose and put glucose in as a reactant. We're also going to need energy in the form of ATP to form NADH, pyruvate, and ATP. Notice since we're putting 2 ATP in and getting 4 ATP out, we only net 2 ATP. So this is a energy costing process, but we do basically double our output. But even more important, what we get is pyruvate. And pyruvate are 3 carbon molecules, and we get 2 of them from the 6 carbon glucose. And in the pyruvate form, they are able to enter the mitochondria, go through a cycle, a metabolic cycle called the Krebs cycle, break off all of the carbons, so we end up with our 6 carbons coming out as a product, form some energy, but the big payoff is that they form these 10 electron carriers that then, along with the 2 electron carriers from glycolysis, enter electron transfer phosphorylation. And notice this is where we get the large amount of energy, 32 ATP, from. So let's do a quick breakdown of each of these 3 steps. starting with glycolysis. Glycolysis takes the 6-carbon compound glucose, ADP and inorganic phosphate, along with the electron carrier NAD+, occurs in the cytoplasm, and as an end result, we produce pyruvate, ATP, and NADH. The pyruvate will enter the mitochondria and go into the Krebs cycle. The ATP can be used for direct energy, and the NADH is your electron carrier that will be used in oxidative phosphorylation or the electron transport chain. So now let's look deeper into glycolysis. So if you recall, it took 2 ATP to get glucose to become 2 pyruvate, which can then enter the mitochondria and go through the Krebs cycle. And we produced 4 ATP. The first half of glycolysis requires energy. So as you can see on the screen, we have our 6-carbon, that's what these black circles are, glucose molecule. It is energized by gaining a phosphate from ATP. ADP is produced as waste. This molecule that now has a phosphate, which is on carbon 6, so that's why it's called glucose 6-phosphate, gains another phosphate from an ATP. This phosphate is now on carbon 1, so it's called fructose 1,6-bisphosphate. Fructose is in essence the same thing as glucose, it's just the atoms are arranged a little differently, so don't let that confuse you. So by the end of this energy inputting steps, we end up with 2 3-carbon compounds called PGAL, and each one of these has gained a phosphate group. So the PGAL molecules are more destabilized or energized than the glucose that we started with. Of course, at each blue arrow, we have an enzyme mediating or assisting in this process by lowering the energy of activation. Now we're going to look at the latter half of glycolysis where we get energy out. So these 2 PGAL molecules enter, each one a reaction. Notice they gain another phosphate, so that changes their structure a little bit and their name. And we end up getting what are called coenzymes that have been reduced, meaning they've gained electrons, and those are NADH molecules. These 2 NADH molecules will go to the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. The 2 PGA enter another reaction where we have a phosphate taken off. So notice here 2 phosphates on that PGA, and here 2 phosphates on this PGA. And now there's only 1 on each. So the removal of that phosphate is added to an ADP. So we end up getting ATP, a total of 2, because again we've removed 2 phosphates, 1 from each PGA. That causes a different molecule to be formed, which is called PEP. The last series of reactions of glycolysis are where these PEP molecules again lose a phosphate each, which is added to ADP, forming ATP, and pyruvate. So our end product from our 6-carbon glucose is 2 3-carbon pyruvates. Notice we have not lost any carbons, we've just rearranged them. These 2 pyruvate can then enter the mitochondria and go into the Krebs cycle. The total of 4 ATP that we have produced can be used for cellular work. But notice it cost us 2 to begin with, so it's like we've only gained 2 or net 2 ATP. The NADH, which are electron carriers now, they go into the electron transport system. Recall, glycolysis is occurring in the cytoplasm of the cell. So now that we've finished glycolysis, we're going to look at the mitochondria. For the mitochondria is where both the Krebs and the electron transport system occur. Notice again the mitochondria is divided into an outer and an inner membrane, as well as a matrix. And all of these areas have enzymes that assist us in the Krebs cycle and electron transport.